Hello and welcome everybody to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 15, where we talk all things prospecting, but in particular prospecting the ABL, a 30-team fantasy baseball league with 20 slots for minor leaguers on each team for a glorious 600 prospects. And tonight I am joined by one of the newest members of the ABL. He is the owner of the ABL Houston Astros, and that's Evan. And Evan and I are in a bunch of leagues together. But without further ado, we'll bring him on and hear about his transition to the ABL and how he's finding it in ABL land. Hey, Evan, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Glad to be here. First time, long time.
There you go. There you go. Just like a WFAN caller in. And for those who don't live in New York, you're missing out.
Has to be the fan.
Absolutely. So, listen, I mean, I know, we've been in fantasy leagues for a number of years together. And League of Roto Junkies is the league we've been in mostly together, which is a 16-team hold forever dynasty league. So different setup, no salary cap, no auction, just a straight draft that we do every year, which is mostly focused on minor leaguers, although every once in a while people cut major league players of note. But this is a very different experience for you. It's a 30-team dynasty league. And what I'm interested in talking to you about, hearing about is first, like your general dynasty experience, and then how the transition has been to ABL.
Okay.
So go for it.
I have not been playing dynasty for like relatively long, but I've been playing fantasy baseball for a very long time. I started playing fantasy baseball on like 12-team Yahoo head-to-head leagues in like the end of high school, early college. It's like, early 2000s, maybe late 90s. And I played for like a very long time with my friends. And then, eventually like my friends sort of phased out, stopped playing, but I was like always still really into it. And then like life got in the way and I like stopped for a while, right? And then
was that called law school, Evan?
I mean, there was a few things, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. But so I was like trying to think about this, and what happened was, right, prospects, so like I started listening to podcasts. I eventually came back to fantasy baseball, and I like started listening to podcasts. I remember listening to like early ESPN, Matthew Berry baseball podcasts. And I remember just like when I started listening to podcasts, it was like giving me the itch more to get back into the fantasy stuff. And
let me interject there. What was it that like excited you and sparked that interest about prospecting in particular?
Yeah. So what I was going to say was that led to podcasts that would talk about like dynasty baseball and like other aspects of fantasy baseball. And it just was really interesting to me. I really liked the people who talked about it in these podcasts. I found them to be like really relatable. And there was something like cool about like I'm remembering, like I used to listen to like the RotoWire, James Anderson, Clay Link RotoWire podcasts, like when James Anderson was like first doing those. And he was like, right, so like they would like talk about the prospects and the dynasty stuff, and then like at the end they would talk about like their favorite hip-hop songs for like 10 minutes. And I was like, wait, these guys are like into prospects and they like cool things too, like so it's okay for me to like do this again too, and
right. So they normalized your baseball geekiness.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And the podcast really played a big role and just led me to want to like get back into it. So what happened was, I know this was like, a few years before the pandemic, I did my first 12-team Yahoo Dynasty League startup draft. Like I found guys on Roto World. There was also Roto World, the forums.
Sure.
That was a big one, getting me back into fantasy and dynasty in particular. I remember going on there looking for my first like dynasty league to join. I found a 12-team head-to-head league to join, did the startup draft. And, that was like Yahoo. So I had like 7 prospects that I couldn't even put in like a spot. Maybe you could put them in like an NA slot or something.
Right.
Uh, but I remember I had the 12 pick. I had like the wheel, which I love. So I got 2 picks in a row, killed it. Got Harper and Machado. I don't know what year that was. I just like remember it very clearly.
That's a
And
while back. That's a good draft.
yeah, I mean, yes, it was good. I knew like I wanted to have like a win now kind of team. And like that team is in year 5 this year, and I had to leave the league. I just told the guy that I was like, look, I can't do it. I got too much, it's grown. It's out of my control now. I can't do this 12 team stupid Yahoo league anymore where I destroy everybody every year.
Right.
Sorry. But
it was too easy for you.
Like I can't even get it. Like that team is crazy. But somebody else will now have that team, and hopefully they don't run it into the ground. But that was my first one, and then it just like grew from there. I think I found League of Roto Junkies on Roto World. I think I found Jeff on Roto World, and joined that league through the dispersal draft. I think it was like 3 or 4 teams.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked my team coming out of there, and that was when it really became like it really was with Lorge. I call it Lorge. Yeah. Where I started to realize like I'm really into the prospects right now, and I the trading stuff, right? Like that really is the thing for me, is like just to have all the prospects, to know them, to be on top of it, and to trade them, and like understand the value, and try to like get to like a good team and continue the prospect building. And
right. Yeah,
and
there's multi-level strategy, right? In Dynasty that you just don't have in redrafts or even shallow keeper leagues.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's a totally different game, and it's a different thing. And like the fact that it was a totally different thing, combined with my like genuine interest in learning about the prospects and like knowing what's going on, and all of this happening at the same time, when like every year there's like more information, there's more people out there writing and doing podcasts and providing info and content, blah blah blah, and it's just like becoming more in the whatever culture world that I'm like sort of in this bubble. And it was just like all really appealing to me, and I just like really have a lot of fun with it. And now I'm in like however many, I'm in like maybe 6 or 7 leagues. And
well, that's what I was going to ask you next, is like how bad is the addiction? So 6 or 7 leagues.
Well, it was bad for a second. Like this off season, it got bad for a minute, because like I was really hoping to get into ABL, and during that time when I like wasn't sure, I joined a couple of other leagues. Like I took over other teams, and then I found out that I could be in ABL, and I was like, geez, this is not ideal, but I had to do it. And no regrets. But like ABL is a totally different thing. It's like a real challenge for me. What I was going to say.
We'll get to that. I do want to hear about that, because that's the next topic. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of guys who come into the league, just because it's so deep and there's so many owners of different skill sets across the board and dealing with them. We'll get to that. But I do want to ask you a couple questions. Your other leagues that you're in, what kind of depth of those leagues in terms of the number of teams? Do they range all over the place, or do you have kind of a sweet spot?
Yeah, it's probably a sweet spot. I don't think I'm in any more 12-team leagues, but a couple of them are 14 teams. A bunch of them are 16. There's an 18-team league I think I joined, and then that's the next deepest one to ABL, which is
yeah. And
yeah,
are they all like auctioned? Except for, I know Lord just hold forever, but what's the spread there?
So they are all like keep forever dynasty leagues, which really made me feel like I got to try ABL. I got to like stop with this, because I really want this challenge of like something different, and just like the keep forever prospects thing is, you once you start doing this for a long time, you understand that like it gets to a point where like it's not fun anymore. I'm sorry to say, but
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on why it isn't fun. I mean, one of the things I have found frustrating in hold forever formats is that trading gets very stagnant at a certain point,
mhm,
right? Because if you're trying to be competitive, it's very hard to like put your team over the top. Um, unless you have like sometimes new owners come in and they just blow up their teams, and you
yeah,
can do it that way. But um, the competitive balance is very uneven because of because of the format where people are trading for all future or all present, both at the same. You have half the league doing one or the other, and you know, prospects take on a or can take on an incredible amount of value in those hold forever leagues, which makes it very difficult to part with them, but also very difficult to acquire them.
yeah,
So you have really lopsided trades, or just kind of big trades, I would call them. That's been my experience. But what are your thoughts?
yeah. The same. That's the thing, is that it gets to a point where the league you like kind of hit a wall. You're lucky when you have a league of like a bunch of people who are just like always active and competitive and are able to build their competitive teams and maintain them. And that's really the key. And when you lose that, when you lose the like communication and the interest, um the league can get to a point where it's like it becomes not fun even for the better teams, and like that's really just like not what I want.
Right,
um
right. No, I
so
get it.
yeah.
I get it. ABL does not suffer that problem. But before we get to the Houston Astros and the ABL and your experience, you mentioned the podcast you were listening to towards the beginning of your journey in
Yes.
Dynasty. Are there resources or sources you've come to rely on more over time, or things that interest you now that you weren't really into before?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I still listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen a lot, like on my commutes. I'm always listening. If I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to like fantasy baseball podcasts. um I do subscribe to a bunch of places, right? Like I have a BA subscription. I have a subscription to some of the other ones. Like I do pay Prospects Live. Um, what I like right now are like the more independent guys doing their things. Like, so there are guys I like who have like Substacks, and sort of they're trying to like do their own thing. So there are a couple of guys that I do that with. So I get their content in like newsletters,
Uh huh.
and one really key thing is the Discord, you know, because a lot of these guys have their own Discord communities,
Uh huh.
and it's just very dangerous for me. Like when I'm at work and I have a Discord window open and I can just talk and BS with people about prospects and baseball all day, it's very distracting. But the
Yeah.
thing about that is that is really what I feel makes me like a better player, and just that really is the key to like what keeps me on top of things, because it really is like the community, right? There's like people sharing stuff all day, people you like, you learn who you trust, and
Right.
you could talk directly to these people, like you can join a writer's, you can pay a guy $7 a month, get in his Discord and message him, whatever question you want, or you can just like talk to him all day. Like these people are regular people, they're not like these experts, right? Like
Right.
experts online doing expert fantasy stuff. They're like, they're not anybody. I mean, they're great because they make this material for people, and it's really good stuff, and they like provide this information that's like really valuable for people, um that for their like for this like hobby.
Right,
um
right. This is interesting because I think you're the first guest we've had on the show that's talked about getting into discords, and kind
oh
of
yeah.
getting into community
Oh
chat.
yes.
That's great. I
No,
think you're
listen,
gonna get
I
up.
am right. I'm thinking like, do I share the names? I don't know.
Well,
I
I'll
don't know
leave
if
that
you're
to
gonna get
you.
that out of me.
I'll leave that to you. You can keep that in your DMs with people who hit you up.
So yeah, please,
Uh,
guys can DM me,
yeah,
sure.
yeah. And I see we
It's
have
not
some
hard.
people.
It's not hard to find them. I just want to be clear.
No, no, no. There aren't really any trade secrets in this industry.
Right. Yeah.
I see we have some folks watching live, and if they want to drop a question in the comment box, they should feel free to do so.
I
But
can't see that at
let's
all.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your transition into the ABL and the Houston Astros. And I see I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you are wearing your Astros hat. I know you're not an Astros fan. So this
No,
is in your
not at all.
capacity as the owner of the ABL Astros, and I know you are a Yankees fan, and you're wearing your Soto shirt.
Damn
So
right.
there it is, and you must be very happy about Soto being in the fold.
Pretty happy about that. Yes.
It's exciting. So do you have any conflict being an Astros owner and a Yankees fan? Do you have any kind of moral like dilemma every morning when you wake up and turn your screen on?
I mean, kind of. Yeah. Right. Like, I mean, I was telling you before, I think I told some people in the league that like I needed to buy a hat, but like I was not going to buy a Astros hat, right? So I went on eBay and I found the one Astros hat that is just like the words Houston Astros, like perfect. I'll take it. And yeah, I changed the logo to the vintage Astros logo because
I see
I
that.
don't want to be associated with the new with these Astros. And it's fine. I'm like I've said, these are my Houston Astros. These are not the Houston Astros. These are Evans Astros.
That's right.
And we're on the way. We're getting there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so do you know the Astros used to be called the Colt 45s?
Yeah, I don't know like the total history of that, but I know the Colt 45's hat is really cool. I remember
Yeah,
I've seen it before.
yeah.
I mean, that's cool. Guns are
They came
cool.
in at the same time when the Mets came in, so 1962.
Oh, is that
Um,
true? In
I
62?
believe that's right. So they're the Colt 45s, and they changed it after I guess somebody told them it was a bad idea to name them after
It's a
kind of
man
like
for
the
time.
Washington Bullets.
It's like, I don't know about that. If I want
Yeah.
to put my, yeah.
So tell me about your experience. You inherited a team that had been abandoned, and you had quite a lot of roster change, including your minor leagues, as I recall. Although I
Mhm.
don't, it's hard to track every team's moves in this league because there's just so many moves. But
Right.
how have you found, entry into ABL with a particular focus on, your prospecting approach and how it's evolved or changed, if at all, after joining the ABL?
Yeah. It has changed, or like it's like my thinking is different in this league than other leagues, right? Um, you know, ABL is my first 30-team league. After the last deepest one I really have done is 16 teams. ABL is my first points league I've ever done. And and right, so like it's a really big shift for me from like what I've typically done and played. Um so I'm really trying to be conscious of that with my prospects. And usually with prospects, I do like the very high upside guys. Like, even if they're far away, right? Like I'm really always thinking about the value of my prospects, right? I don't really care what position they play. I don't really care. I usually don't really care how old they are. I just want really good players who I know are going to increase in value. And um, that is different in ABL, I think. Or
How so?
I think I'm going to approach it differently. Because I want to field a team. Well, ABL has some interesting rules, and they, sort of require you to maintain a pretty good team. Sorry if I'm looking at my roster right now.
Yeah, take your time.
So
I
I
got your roster
do
up too.
right. So like I do have a lot of confidence in my ability to like find prospects and to like know what who these prospects are, like when I'm looking at them, like I pretty much like know what I have, and I think that I need to take advantage of that in ABL by like understanding who's up soon, who's not up soon, who has a skill set that's going to help me in ABL specifically as this like 30 team points league. And that's why I'm gonna have more pitchers than I usually do.
Well, let's talk about that, but I want to talk about a couple of things you mentioned because there's a lot embedded in what you've been talking about. So you talked
Okay.
about who's going to be up soon, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like proximity is
Yeah.
taking on more relevance to you than it did in your other leagues. So that's one thing. And proximity certainly can have a big impact in ABL, particularly because the teams are so deep. There's 30 teams, you got deep rosters, and if somebody gets called up to the majors, even if they're only a part-time player, they can add points every day for you when they play, right? So there's
Oh
value
yeah.
in that, and they're cheap when they come up usually, right? Because we have a for those who don't know or don't remember, we have a 260 salary cap on draft day, and then we have a 360 in season. And there are penalties if you make contracts with players that you don't want anymore and you have to cut them. So money matters, right? So proximity is one thing. You also talked a lot about the value of a prospect. And I assume, although you didn't say it, I assume you were talking about trade value. It could be some
Yeah.
other kind of value too, but I thought I inferred you were talking about trade value. Has your thinking around that changed at all coming into ABL? Because I totally get it in a dynasty hold forever format. Or or do you think differently about trade value in some way because of ABL?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the answer to that is that like I haven't gotten deep enough in the trade weeds of ABL yet. I think that like I am somebody who really does like to talk to my league mates,
Mhm.
learn about them, learn like tendencies of my league, and like understand what I can do and what I maybe can't do. And I think that I'm still learning, or like I might have not even like started yet with ABL, right? Like we haven't even started. The season has not started yet.
Right, 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 right.
So
I mean, that
like,
doesn't stop trading from happening in the
right.
ABL
Although there has not been much trading,
of late. Yeah, usually
right.
there's a lull after the draft.
Yeah,
After
yeah.
after you get the
There's
auction and yeah. I mean,
yeah, totally understandable, right? Like there's really not much going on.
right. I mean, they just
But
literally started playing spring training games. So
yes, that's true. Um, but yes, it's trade value. It really is. Which I mean, that is this sort of the same thing as the value, kind of.
yeah, it can be. It can be. I mean, we talked also about thinking about how a prospect is in a points league versus a roto league, for example. And what are your at least early thoughts, recognizing this is the first one you've done, and undoubtedly will evolve over time how you think about these things. But what are your early thoughts, at least, on how it might be different in terms of thinking of a player's value in
Mhm.
that regard?
Yeah, I think it's really different. Like it's particularly in a 30 team points league. Like this is not just a 30 team points league. This is a 30 team points league with 10 lineup spots. No, not. It's just a 9-man lineup, right? There's
Yep.
no middle, there's no corner, and there are like 4 pitchers we play. How many pitchers are this? 7.
Yep.
7 pitchers, right? And we have like the innings caps, right, during the week, right? So
Mhm.
the pitchers, obviously, I believe are going to be like pretty important to have, and or at least like if you're somebody who's on top of prospects, I don't understand how you could not, or how you are not just like diving into the pitching prospects and trying to accumulate some stable of guys, of dollar guys, $2 guys who are going to be there to give you innings, right? Like you need innings.
Yeah.
And um, so so what am I going to do? I don't want to go get a $40 pitcher if my team is like not ready to like win anything. I want to
Right.
have some guys, some cheap guys who can contribute for me and or are worth a lot to somebody else.
Right. Right.
So, you know,
You mentioned. I'm sorry to interrupt. So you mentioned $40 guy. I mean, so the auction takes place, and as you saw, and this is your first auction with the ABL. That pitching is extraordinarily expensive.
I forgot to mention, and it was the auction aspect of it too. You know,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
first,
And we'll
not
get
my
to that
first,
too.
not my first auction, but none of those other leagues do auction.
No, but it's a different sort of auction because you have the cap. You also have all the prospects and players are already held on contracts, which changes the value in the auction. And you see guys who aren't very good pitchers going for $30, $40 in some cases.
Sure.
So it does increase the value of those cheaper but talented young prospects. And it's interesting because a lot of guys come into the league and they don't want to draft pitchers. And if you look at some of the rosters, there's some teams with, just a handful, if any, pitching prospects,
Right.
right? And I know that through speaking with you over the years, I know in other leagues, including League of Roto Junkies, you have a what many would call a healthy aversion to pitching prospects because of the risk, right?
Yes.
But it sounds like that's shifted a little bit. So maybe we'll flesh that out a little bit more. Explain to me, like where you're drawing the lines now, or how you think about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in my other leagues, definitely, I would say I am averse to pitching prospects. Now, the real thing is, it always kind of depends on your team and like and context, right? Like I have a team in Lorge that where I want pitchers, and I'll try to roster a bunch of pitching prospects. So I have them because I suffer catastrophic pitching injuries every single year in that league, and need Jared Jones, like please. But typically, right? So the context thing, like if I'm building up my team, I don't care at all about pitchers. I don't want them. I will get my pitchers when I'm ready to be a good team, right? Like what I always say with Dynasty is that, and like what I've learned is like, I want to be an amazing team or rebuilding. That's all. I don't want to be the fifth place team. Like if I'm the fifth place team, I'm tearing it down. We're rebuilding, right?
We'll come back to that because of
Okay.
ABL. But go ahead, continue.
Yes, right. That's for the keep forever leagues, right? All of this that I'm saying right now applies for those leagues. And so like when I'm rebuilding a team, I don't care about pitching prospects pretty much at all, unless I think that my league does, and I can just get the ones that everybody wants and trade them for bats.
Right.
That's what I'll do. And then when I get my team to the point where it's like, okay, I think I can win some money now, I will trade guys for pitchers that I need. And usually that'll be major league pitchers. And
right. Or guys maybe who are on the cusp of becoming major league players, right?
Maybe. I'm really more, I would rather buy or trade for like Clayton Kershaw,
Right.
Like I think I traded Soderstrom like before his debut in Lorge for Kershaw when my team was like competing and wanting to win something.
Yep.
Yeah, that's like the type of trade I like to do at that time. So, which brings me to ABL, where I will not do any of that.
Well, so let's talk about why it's a little bit different in the ABL, because I agree with you. It is a different calculus.
Yeah.
Particularly with pitching, but I'm interested in hearing your thoughts.
Right. So in ABL, I'm going to like really start considering pitchers and like what it will mean to like keep them on my roster for longer, or to just like try to get my hands on pitchers that are closer to debuting, and and like, and even younger pitchers who might have a lot of value, or like their value might increase significantly. I don't want to like take it too far,
Nope.
but yeah, like some of these Yankee pitchers, for example, that I really like, they're young. Um, I would
Yankees
never
have a
roster.
lot of very interesting young pitchers. I think between the two of us, we know
Yeah,
most of them.
right. So like those are guys that typically I would not own, um, but like it's making me think that, like, even like the thing about like not ever wanting to have a fifth place team, like that, even that idea I can't really consider in ABL. I sort of just want to have, I just want to kind of like maintain good players, I think.
Right. Well, I mean, just to give context, in the ABL we have a playoff format, right?
Right.
And so, and because it's head to head in the playoff and points, like
Right.
it's conceivable that the team that's fifth place going in could beat the team that was first at the end of the
Yeah.
season. Um, it really depends on matchups and health at the time you play, and there's an element of luck, and how many starts you get that weekend from whom, for whatever reason, right?
Correct.
So you really can't go into it thinking you're going to tear down a fifth place team. Although I've seen a lot of owners do stuff like that,
Mhm.
because they want to be great and not just good.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think it's a challenge to rebuild in this league too, because if you start stripping away all your good players, you're like literally starting with nothing.
Yeah, and like how long do you want to be building it back up, like sometimes I think I like get cocky and think that I can just like get there really fast. Like I can build a team really quickly, like within a year or something. Um, I don't think I can do that in ABL. Although the auction does add a dynamic there that, like, could twist that in a way. But
Yeah,
I just feel like I'm personally like so on top of the prospects, or try to be, that I need to take advantage of that in ABL. And I just really want to keep a lot of good prospects around. And because of it being like a deep points league, I'm going to want to keep good pitchers around with them too.
yep, yep. There are a handful of owners in the league that really embrace rostering pitchers, and I've had this conversation with a lot of guys over the course of the show, and some people remain adverse to them. They don't want to have, they don't trust the investing in them. They're not confident in their own evaluation process, or they just they're out on pitchers. And there are other guys who are going to be rostering people, and sometimes it's not the ones you've heard of. And you do this a lot. You'll pick up roster players that aren't necessarily on top 100 lists, and not, or top 500 lists even. Like I've seen you pick up very young pitchers,
Mhm.
and oftentimes they're guys that I'm following. Like, because and we're probably listening to different podcasts or reading different materials, but they're all kind of collating or coalescing around the same guys, you
Yeah.
know. And so I want to talk to you about one of the guys you picked up right after the draft, with one of your waiver claims, and it's a Yankee pitcher, and his
Okay.
name's Carlos Lagrange, or Lagrange,
Sure.
yeah, however you
I'm gonna
pronounce
go.
it.
I would like to call him Lagrange.
Sure, I like that even better. It's much sexier.
Because Henry Lelane, the Henry Lelane, I recently learned is Henry Lalane, which absolutely blew my mind. And so I'm gonna go with that um, pronunciation for Mr. Lagrange.
I love it. I love it. Happy to call him whatever he's actually called, but I like that, and we'll use that for right
Sure,
now.
Carlos.
Yeah,
Carlos LG. So
yeah.
yeah,
So
he
yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
I mean, I
Just
don't know
a
if you had a
little.
specific question about him, but like I just
I
saw he
do.
was.
I have some
Oh,
questions
okay.
about him. Like, so look, somebody that I was following, and I actually thought about drafting in this most recent draft. Um, he does have some concerns about his control, which is why I passed on him in the draft. But it was seriously considering putting a claim in for him.
Mhm.
I picked up a few other prospects, or actually one, excuse me, one other prospect in the waivers process, and wasn't going to put a claim in for him. But then you nabbed him. So I'm curious, how, first of all, how you learned about him,
Mhm.
and you know what you like about him, and do you have any concerns about him? He's obviously very young. He's 20. He just turned 20. But he's, one of these big, hard throwing Yankees pitching prospects,
Yeah.
that a lot of people haven't heard of. So tell me, how you got to him, and what you're thinking on him is right now, particularly as it fits into the ABL.
Okay. I like him because he's a Yankee. I like him because, so he's a name who I've seen like since last year. I do keep tabs on very deep lists, like I'm not like I don't like live by the list. I'm weird with this stuff. So I'm listening to a lot of different people. I'm reading a lot of different things, keeping tabs on a lot of different lists and using all of that to just come to my own decision.
Mhm.
And I really like doing it that way. And I feel really good about doing it that way because I just consume so much of it. So I really feel like I've consumed so much of it to the point where like I listen to certain guys who I trust on these
Mhm.
podcasts or reading on Baseball America or whatever. And I know when they're talking about a guy in a certain way, that means that I need to be aware myself.
Right.
Their voice changes, they use certain words, they get excited. And like that is incredibly valuable for me. And like when that happens, I immediately pick up these guys, or they're at least like on my radar, and like I just don't forget about them.
Yeah.
And I use like certain tools, like RotoWire is another one I pay for that I really like, and I love their tool where you can enter your team and filter it by available players in the league. I
Oh,
think there are
interesting.
a couple of services that do this. So you can like upload through Fantrax, through CBS, whatever you use. It takes all the information from your league, and then you can filter the lists, the prospect list, the dynasty list, and you can just look at like available free agents based on their rank. Um, look at it with your roster there as well, with the players available, where they all fit in that lineup, and you can see who's available, who you think is going to be available even after the first run of pickups, whatever. And Mr. Legrand was a guy who like I had seen there. I knew he was a Yankee. I know that he throws hard.
Mhm.
I know that he's not 18, like I like that he's not 18, he's 20.
Yep.
He's been in full season ball, and he's on the Yankees BA list. He's on other Yankee lists,
Mhm.
and he's like a name that could be something. Now, like you say, you didn't pick him up because of his control. Is that true?
For now, he was like a guy that I would have picked up probably eventually. Like, it wouldn't have stopped
Yeah,
me from picking him up.
right.
But there are guys on my roster right now. I'll put it this way, who I wasn't willing to cut. I was not willing to cut for him right now because I want
Okay,
to see how they're going to do at the beginning of the season.
gotcha.
Um,
So,
you know,
yeah.
yeah. So
Because my thing is that
mhm,
I would never make that determination, right? I would
okay,
never say I'm not picking up this prospect because he's a 40 command, right? Like I do not care. What I care about is, are people talking about him? Is he
right.
somebody that is known? Is he somebody that could get better, right? Like I'm not like I know metrics, analytics, but the reason that I know them is because I hear everybody talking about them and I read other people telling me that this guy's exit velocity is good, right?
Sure.
I will never like make my own anything. when it comes to that stuff. I
Yeah, I
like
mean, so let me
right.
contextualize my comment because it's not. I don't think it's that different from what you're saying. So,
Okay.
you know, I read about him for the first time in Baseball America, and I read some. There were some very positive things I read about him. You know, there were also some questions about his control and whether he was going to ultimately profile as a starter or a very tall, powerful reliever, which have very different values in fantasy, right? Um, and I read about him in Baseball HQ, which had a similar kind of write up of him. And there's some other sources that I look at as well, but those are my, I've been very open about the fact that those are my two primary sources for prospects.
Yeah.
So I tend not to listen to as many sources as you do. It sounds like, and it sounds like that works for you, which is great. But I find the noise to be distracting for me by having a lot of different people talking about things. So chatter, and I'm not saying that's what you were referring to, but chatter for me is something I try to tune out.
Yeah.
And if you have trusted sources you're listening to, and you hear multiple people talking about a guy, that can be an indication that regardless of whatever warts the prospect has, it's worth picking them up immediately, right? And I will tell you that, like, on my draft board this year, I've been slowly implementing a kind of a numerical system, which is reflected in the prospect handbook that I'm putting out, but it's a work in progress. He actually scored very high, and would have been an early draft pick for me.
Mhm.
And I actually moved him down because the risk reward of a guy like that, there were other guys I liked better given the risk
Yeah.
tolerance. So I just moved him down my board. And maybe that was a mistake. I mean, he could turn out to be great. I mean, he has like just a devastating fastball, and he's got I think his second pitch is a slider, which is also supposed to be like dominating.
Right.
Um, so we'll see where he goes. But that's kind of where I was coming from with the comment about his command. There's just other guys that I prefer just a little bit better given their overall profile. I mean, I picked up a Yankee prospect with my last draft pick was Alejandro, Jerson Alejandro, who I like
Yeah.
very much, and it's actually a similar profile, to Carlos, but you know, I don't think he's going to have the same two kind of devastating top pitches. Um,
Yeah, I think what I'm just trying to say is that like I'm really not thinking about his arsenal, and I'm not thinking about his command and control. He's like number 8 or 9 on my like pecking order of pitchers. I don't know. Maybe he's higher than that, but he's just like it's not like a prospect I'm like particularly going to be like relying on. That's definitely like a let's see what happens.
oh,
And
sure.
he's 20, he's in full season ball, and like is there a narrative? Is it in like is there a realistic outcome where he like just is amazing this year and becomes like a top 10 pitching prospect?
There is.
I think there is, yeah.
I agree.
And there he is for $1
Yeah.
on waivers. So like, and I have a spot, so like, why not?
Oh,
Right?
100%. I'm with you. I mean, I would definitely roster him in ABL.
Right. So like, that's
And
my thing. That's like the entirety of my thinking with him.
yeah, and that's totally fair. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
the guy that I probably would have cut for him is the Rocky shortstop Bernard, who made profile as a second baseman, Derek Bernard.
I would
Um,
also make that move
yeah. So
because isn't he like a DSL guy?
he's an interesting story. The answer is yes. The direct answer is yes, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. He had to repeat the DSL because he had a visa problem and couldn't get stateside. So he actually did 2 seasons, and he did well in both seasons. But unsurprisingly, as an 18-year-old in DSL, he destroyed it
Yeah.
and had a very strong year. Which you have to discount because he's playing against kids. He's got the advantage on. But his first year, he did well as well. So he'll be stateside for the first time this season. I guess he's got his visa stuff cleared out. So I'm very interested to see how he does. And he's a guy I've been holding for a while. So I didn't want to cut him at this point before seeing rookie ball play out at least a little bit. But
Yeah.
there are going to be other guys like this on the wire that I'll have and you will too. Like we'll have queued up and like they're next in line. If so, Bernard
Yeah.
struggles and I decide to pull the cord, it's not going to like kill me to do that. But I just wanted to hold and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much exactly the same on him. I think the difference is that I would do that move right now.
Yeah,
Like,
that's fair.
I think I can replace the bat, the Bernard bat, if I
Yeah,
need to.
that's
Um,
totally fair. I mean, I've he's like candidly like the last guy on my roster right now.
right.
And there could be somebody else I catches my fancy, and but then again, he could also have a great start to the season. He plays, ultimately projects to
Yeah,
play in cores.
he's
Great.
no Robert Kalaz.
No, I had him last year and traded him, but he's another
That's for
guy who
you.
I like, picked up off the wire in ABL.
Yeah, right.
Clause. And so,
So, like, that is very informative for me to
yeah,
know that you picked up Robert Kalaz off the waivers last year in ABL. Like,
yeah,
I will be filing that away in my head.
yeah.
That
No, I mean, there are
that's
guys.
it. Yeah,
You're going to find guys who are out there on the wire that you're tracking, and they stay out there. And I think one of the interesting things about the league is you've got guys who are very, very skilled owners at managing their major league rosters, and understanding fantasy baseball from that perspective. And then you have a real divergence in skill levels and interest in prospecting.
yeah.
So while it's a 30-team league, it's not 30 owners chasing prospects. I think you're going to find there's probably a list of about 7 or 8 guys who are really kind
Oh,
of like
yeah.
plucking.
You got the list?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it fluctuates year to year. And in fairness, there are a couple new guys who I don't have a
Sure.
book on, right? Um, but they're the ones churning the prospect wire.
No,
Um,
I hear you.
yeah.
I don't understand how it's not 30 people, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Well,
Like, I've talked to a lot of these guys. You guys, like, really know your stuff. Like,
yeah,
why are you dismissing these prospects, especially in this league?
yeah. Well, and
Like,
look, it's not everybody for sure. I mean, I'm
yeah,
being, what I'm talking about is the prospect hounds who really chase dudes. I think a lot of
yeah,
guys do know prospects, but they hold their guys more, and they just like to see what's going to happen rather than churn
yeah,
like 3 or 4 guys on their roster. Other dudes, and I'm one of them, will churn guys. And I'm sure you're going to do the same thing. And I could give you the list. I mean, there are guys who just do it.
yeah.
There are certain owners I worry about beating me to prospects. And then there are other guys I know that aren't going to do that. They're going to take a little bit more time, be a little bit more patient, and there's value in that.
Right.
you know,
Yeah, there is.
um,
There is for sure.
yeah. I mean, I've let go of guys in all my dynasty leagues that I regret letting go of, and it's from this churning. And by the same token, I found guys that nobody else has, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, for me, that is part of the fun, honestly.
yeah,
I I do not have much loyalty to my guys. When I get beat on a trade, you know, it sucks, but like
you move
on
on.
the next one, yeah, like it's all right. Let's see. Like maybe this next guy on my watch list here is going to be better. You know what?
Yeah,
I have it on good authority that he might be better.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
right,
I think it'll be interesting to see what your impression is like mid-season,
yeah,
of how things are going, because I think you'll see there's an ebb and flow to the prospecting, and you start to see patterns of with owners like in anything else, and like the guys they like, what they gravitate to, who you can pick up guys and 2 weeks later trade to, that kind
right,
of stuff.
right. Yeah, there's
Um,
also the fab is a
yes,
part of it. I didn't mention. That's like a thing.
yeah, and
Makes me a little anxious.
yeah, that's a whole skill set too. I mean,
Yeah.
I use, and I've talked about fab strategy on the show before. I
Mhm.
mean, I certainly use the lion's share of my fab every year on prospects.
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I mean, you'll see, I'll churn like the bottom of my prospect, farm system all the time,
Right,
guys that I like, or trade,
right,
guys, and then just replenish, and the fabs to replenish the trades.
right.
Because
Yeah, like, that's, like, new for me. That's another
yeah,
new thing for me.
yeah, I mean, you'll see that I mean, there's a whole strategy to it, but the trick for me anyway is like figuring out the guys that in 3 or 4 weeks are going to be hot names, and getting in early on them.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, you'll be good at that. But you'll just, you'll pick up a guy, and then
Not gonna.
all of a sudden, like, a few weeks later, somebody will say, "Hey, what about this guy? You want to trade him?" Or you'll just suggest the guy, and they'll look him up. And it's like, "Oh yeah, I want him." you
Trust
know.
me. Yeah. No, I know. I know how
Yeah,
it is.
So Kalas was one of those guys last year for me, and
Kalas.
I don't even remember the trade I did. When I traded Kalas, but he obviously was, had a nice summer last year. Um, so good. So it sounds like you're enjoying the entrance into the ABL, including from the
Oh yeah.
prospect. It's a new challenge for you, which is good. Um,
Very much so. I'm really happy to be in this league. I've said that like when I knew there was a league that does this podcast, I knew I had to be in this league. These are my people.
yeah,
So
we have two podcasts.
no, I mean, yeah, not just this podcast.
Yeah,
No,
Tyler.
trust me. I've watched a lot of ABL updates,
Yeah,
armchair
no,
updates.
it's good.
I've seen all the
Tyler
faces.
and Cal have been driving the train on the podcast, which is great.
It is great. It is great.
And they'll be firing up on the regular as soon as the season starts. So right now it's just
Looking forward.
yeah, right now it's just a one dog show, but it'll soon be much more than that. So good. So listen, the last segment of my show, I always want to save crushes and fades, as you know. And so I'm very interested to hear crushes and fades. And just to remind folks, this is the first guest I've had on the show this season. Crushes and fades, people that you like either above consensus or below consensus, relative to, and they can be high ranked prospects. They could be, somewhere in the middle, of the top 100 or whatever it is. You can pick, but I'm just interested. Start with your crushes. Who do you like more than consensus right now, and why?
Okay, I did not prepare for this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the Prospect Handbook.
Oh, there you go.
And I'm going to look at some names. I mean, there are crushes I know I have, and they're like random. So hold on a second. Sorry, I got distracted by somebody.
That's all right. Yeah, you're calling from work right now, so
I am in my office. Yes. Yeah. So I know for a fact, right? There's a guy on the Reds I love. He's a DSL guy named Ricardo Cabrera.
Oh, I know Ricardo Cabrera. Sure.
I tried to get in on him really early, everywhere. He was an under the radar guy in that class with I don't remember who it was. It was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago. But he was the 5th or 6th on that list. And I was just really in on the Reds development of guys. And I saw what he was doing. I saw what he did in the DSL. Then last year he was in Complex, and he was a middle infield guy. I don't think he's going to stick in the middle infield, and he might be third base, but he can really hit. Mm-hmm. And I think he hit over 350, and I just really like those types, middle infieldish types who have the real good hit tool, young, and that's a ride I want to be on right now. Ricardo Cabrera. That's one.
That's a good one.
Let's see. Andrew Painter, crush. I love Andrew Painter. I think.
Tell me about that. He's obviously a very well regarded pitching prospect. But,
yeah, I just think you people should be acquiring him. You need to go after him right now. People might be asleep on him with the injury. I think he's out the entire year this year. I don't think everybody's fully aware of that.
Yeah.
And he was going to be in the Phillies rotation, as a 19-year-old. And when he's healthy, he will be in that rotation. And he's his name is Andrew Painter, he's going to be a thing. And I just the surgery. I'm happy he's having the surgery. He can take all the time he needs. It's a pitcher, right? I'm not relying on it so much if I roster him. And so if I can get somebody like that for a discount, right?
Mhm.
that's like that's guaranteed profit for me. And it's either monster profit or you're gonna know right away that you got to get rid of it, right? Because he's gonna be hurt or something,
Right.
or it's gonna be like coming off the injury. There might be some like something might go wrong, but like that's like absolutely a gamble I'm willing to take.
Yeah, no,
Um,
he's owned by Dave of the Athletics in our league, and so
I like Dave knows what he's doing.
he does know
Um,
what he's doing.
the A's, he's the A's, right?
He's the A's, and I
Yeah.
just noticed he very cheekily changed his team name to the Las Vegas Athletics, which is
Really?
which is
That's
probably a little premature, but it is going to eventually
interesting.
happen. But
Interesting. They
sorry,
did take down they took down the "Rooted in Oakland" sign. Did you see that? Which
yeah.
I thought was hilarious.
Not so rooted anymore. Look,
No, not so
I love
rooted.
Andrew Painter too. I think he's got terrific upside.
Yeah.
I watched when a 19-year-old pitcher entered rotation back in 1984 named Dwight Gooden,
Uh-huh.
and that was pretty spectacular. And
Yeah, exactly. Right.
yeah, he's got a lot of upside. I have a funny story about Painter and fantasy baseball. I was in another dynasty league, and I only had a third round draft pick, and so I'm in Israel visiting my kids, and but participating in the draft, over my phone at the same time.
Sure.
And so back here, Tom was in this league. Remember Tom, the owner of the Chicago White Sox, who's in
Never heard of him.
League of Road Junkies with us, and he's in the same league, and he and I are going back and forth, and I'm like, he's already had his pick in this round, and Andrew Painter's still on the board in the third round, and it's this aversion to 18-year-old pitching prospects, And I'm looking at him, he's falling, and I'm talking with Tom. I said, "Is Andrew Painter really going to fall to me like in the middle of the third round?" And sure enough,
That was a first year player draft.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. See, I was not on Andrew Painter in the first year player draft. I
That was all
definitely
Baseball America for me.
yeah. I definitely avoid pitchers in FYPD.
Yeah.
But
So that's how I got him. So I find with those guys, getting in early and also getting in at a relatively cheap price
yeah,
is
exactly.
really, really helpful.
Mhm.
Because it just manages your investment cost. All right, so those are two crushes. Any more crushes you wanted to mention before we go to fades?
I mean, I see like Termar Johnson, love Termar Johnson. Like I have my favorite prospects. I guess those are my crushes.
Yeah. What do you like about Johnson? Because he's an interesting prospect.
I think that I just really love watching him hit. I like his like the package of the type of player that he is, this sort of like hitter, super hitterish second baseman. I love second basemen. Just not like for fantasy. I just mean like they're my favorite players are like typically second basemen
Why
for
is
some
that?
reason. I don't know. I really don't know. I think they're kind of like awkward, semi forgotten about, but like the good ones are like really good in like unique ways. I was like a big Robinson Cano fan. Cano is absolutely one of my favorite Yankees ever. Yeah, I don't know. Something about like a good hitting second baseman I really like. Termar is like, I really loved listening to people talk about him as like an amateur. He was like talked about like one of the most amazing hitters anyone's ever seen, like videos of his swing. And like his swing is really amazing. There's nothing I like better than like a pretty lefty swing.
I know it's beautiful, isn't it?
And yeah, so he like hit a couple of bombs yesterday. It was nice to see. And also I think people might be a little down on Termar.
Oh, I think
But
they are.
I think it's starting to turn around now. I think like people are definitely he's getting talked up more now, but like we might have missed the
window.
Yeah. But I still would kind of buy now, I think. I wouldn't like overpay for him, which is something I do sometimes.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I'm still very much into him. And I have to mention my guy Henry Lalane, the other Yankee pitcher.
Yeah.
That's like a mega crush for me, and hopefully that's the next ace of baseball.
Yeah. No, he's a very exciting prospect as well. The Yankees just are loaded with like really interesting pitching prospects right now.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like the Yankees pitchers or pitching development they've done a really good job. And if I'm gonna be in a league like this where I need to be on top of pitchers for like the first time, and my Yankees know how to do it, I want a bunch of them.
You're gonna get them.
Literally the first thing I did when I joined ABL was send an offer to Josh for what's up, Ben? For La Lane.
Yeah.
Josh, if you're watching, what's up?
Yeah.
So those are my crushes.
Josh was a prospect hound, before you stepped in for him. So the Astros in that regard haven't lost anything. So fades. Let's talk about fades.
Okay. I'm a hater, so I got some fades. My biggest fade is Mr. Jackson Holiday.
Oh, all right. I like this.
Right. Like the number one prospect. Are we sure about that? I'm just saying, like, I read that there's a good Fangraphs article out today, Jackson Holiday on hitting. Fangraphs always does an article that's like, player on hitting. They have a lot of them where they interview the player and they talk about hitting.
Yep.
So I read it. It was really good. Jackson Holiday is amazing. He's a fantastic hitter. But I noted a couple of times in that article where he says that he is not his dad, and why is he saying that he's not his dad like more than once in that interview? And like I'm reading it and I'm thinking like, he's a great hitter, but he's not Matt Holliday. So how much power is there going to be with Jackson Holiday? And if there's not as much power as you hope, why is he number one? Absolutely give me Junior Caminero before Jackson Holiday in fantasy, right? I will take Churio ahead of Holiday in fantasy. I'm looking at like Wyatt Langford, yes, of course, before Jackson Holiday. So because like the power is just so critical for me in the top. Like if I'm saying you're a top 5, top 3 prospect for fantasy baseball, you need to hit a lot of home runs and you need to steal a lot of bases. Like maybe you don't need to do both of those things. You got to do one of them. And preferably it's homers for me. And, I just think like if he's like a 300 average, great. But if he's a 300 average and he's like 20 homers and 10 steals, why is that the number one prospect above all prospects for fantasy?
Well, it's an interesting question, right? Like, so, you're looking at it appropriately, given the context from a fantasy baseball standpoint, right? And a lot of these prospect lists are mixed. They're not just strictly looking at it from that perspective.
Right.
So you have fielding that comes into play. The fact that he has an exceptional hit tool is driving a lot of that. I mean, in a lot of ways, from a fantasy perspective, he presents very similar issues to Wander Franco when Wander came out. And in a points league like ABL, home runs are extraordinarily valuable, right? Because for an offensive player, they generate the most points. Whereas in a roto league, for example, they're just, a 1 in the home run category. Now they have trickle effects on the other categories, but it's not quite the same as it is in a daily fantasy lineup. And so, we'll talk next on the next show that I have. We'll be talking about the ABL Prospect Handbook, which I published over the weekend. But Churio was the number 1 prospect. Now, Jackson Holiday was a close second on that list. But one of the reasons why Churio beat out Holiday on the list was because of his power.
Right.
And it really is probably nothing more than that. I mean, he's just a power hitter. And the way the handbook is structured, power got weighted more heavily. So, I mean, that's interesting. And, you still like Holiday. You're just saying he's not the number 1 guy in your mind.
I like Holiday very much. Like I believe that he will be I'm not going to say he's going to be a power hitter, but like, I think he's going to hit enough home runs to be like a high enough fantasy draft pick. Right. I just like right now, he's not doing that for me. Like he's not getting me that excited for fantasy, right? And like you're right that all these these resources that I like, the podcasts I listen to, the stuff that I read is like pretty much exclusively with a fantasy like bent,
Yep.
like, I'm reading BA, I'm reading all of their like regular mainstream coverage, but I'm thinking about it for fantasy.
Yep.
And like, and how does this work? Like they do now do
Yep.
actual fantasy coverage, which is really cool.
Yep.
But like when I read Baseball America, when I read like, The Athletic or whatever I'm reading, it's always like thinking about it for fantasy baseball, and like, and I'm thinking if somebody's like overvalued or undervalued.
Yeah.
And I just think that like I do believe that Jackson Holiday can get to like a first round fantasy pick, like,
Yeah.
but there's nothing in what I like read and see about him that says that he's going to be this dynamic home run hitting, stealing base type of guy. Like, right. Like he's a guy, he's got like a pretty face. He looks like the face of a team. Like, like he looks like he could be like in commercials. But
no doubt he will be.
right. Well, you say that.
I'm
But
sure
like,
locally they'll have him in commercials.
oh yeah, of course, yeah, sure.
So Ben has a question for you. Would you take Cam or Arturo?
I would take Junior Caminero for like this year. I probably would take him overall, only because there's a chance that Churio is not, like, Churio's going to have to show that he can hit and like not strike out all the time. And
Right.
I think Caminero's going to get away with like hitting 35 homers, right? Like being like a Austin Riley light.
That has value.
Like maybe not light. I think he'll hit for the same power as Austin Riley. I just think like Austin Riley's shown he's like a 280 hitter now, which I never thought would be. Like he like gets on base, and like I just don't know if Churio's going to hit some homers and steal. Like he's going to be an Acuna light.
Maybe one day not light. I don't know.
That's what, right. Definitely. Absolutely. Like the thing I love about Jackson Churio is that he's like overperformed everywhere as like being young for the level everywhere. Like he's just like the definition of overperformance multiple times. And it's like, how do you deny that now? So like,
he's a very exciting player.
Yeah, I love Churio.
Yeah, and we should all have such problems of choosing between these prospects because they're all great.
Yeah.
So what other fades do you have?
Let's see. I know I saw right away, like Colton Cowser is a guy I will never own. I don't believe that Colton Cowser is like I don't think he like stays in that lineup.
Right. He might not. I mean, he might get himself traded out of there.
I'm like, even if he's traded out of there, like, what is he going to be? Like, I for fantasy, right? This is all for fantasy. Like, I just don't know, like, where is the special skill that I'm going to like lean on with him? And like, he's like just continually on these lists. I don't really understand.
Yeah, I think, you see him on there's a element of prospect lists that's always bothered me, which is that you can have kind of like sunk cost issues. So people will put a Cowser on their list coming out of college or going into the draft, and he'll be like, number 15 or whatever. That I'm just making the number up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he plays and he does okay, but not great. And then he's number 20. And then, he's number 25, and then he's number 30. Just, but doesn't get booted off the list, right? It's just like people have bought in. Right. They don't want to admit the mistake and like get rid of him off the list entirely, right?
Yes.
And to me, he's one of those players. It doesn't mean he's going to be a bad baseball player.
Right.
In terms of his fantasy value, I think
exactly
it's pretty capped, right? I mean, is he Alex Verdugo?
Like Alex Verdugo, I don't know.
Right. I mean, and that has value in real baseball, but how much fantasy value does it have?
Right.
Look, if you have Colton Cowser and ABL on a relatively inexpensive contract, that has value.
100%. And like, that is something that needs to be said, is that like, give me Colton Cowser and ABL. Give me like all these guys in ABL. But it is true. And something that I think about is that like you have a top 100 list, but what is that list really? That list is like 10 guys at the top that you really want and can like really count on. And then there's everybody else. And like everybody else is just like a glob of the pretty much the sameness with, depending on like where they are in their career, in their, like value wise, it's like I try to find where I will be able to like profit. A guy that is like not where he's going to be.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
Colton Cowser is the exact opposite of that. Colton Cowser has like hit a wall, and there's like it is the end of the line for Colton Cowser as a prospect for like my fantasy consideration.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I hear that entirely. I mean, one last thing about lists, because I've railed on lists in the Discord, and I
Sure.
hate them. Um, you know, a lot of the lists have to do with proximity and how aware people are of the prospects, right? And so guys who aren't on these lists, right, or there was a time when Lane wasn't on a list,
Right.
right? Or any of the guys we've liked or found, Kalaz wasn't on any lists, and now you're starting to see him at the bottom of the top 100. And you really have a better shot at finding true value by buying low and appreciating the growth up by getting guys who are not on anybody's list, right?
Yeah.
And then the lists get littered with dudes who really aren't special, but they're talented. I mean, and they're going to make the majors. They've gotten up to AAA, and so now they're close, so they're still on the list, and like they'll be a Major League Baseball player. Good for them.
Yeah. Or you try to like play the game, right? There's like you try to guess, find your guys. Who do you like? And like the way that I do it is by like listening very closely to the way these guys are talked about and written about, and like you understand that like a guy goes on a podcast and says, I saw this guy, Ricky Tiedemann, this 3rd-round pick out of JUCO college. He was throwing on a backfield in spring, and somebody told me that he's like looks really good.
Yeah.
And like, and that person, I really trust that person pretty much like everything they say. So that's it. And this is like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. That's how I found out about Yuri Perez.
Right.
It was actually exactly that scenario.
Yeah.
Where he was throwing on a back lot at spring training, and somebody from Baseball America happened to go watch him.
Right.
And the gushing, effusive scouting report that came out of that, like I was just like, I literally the next day had him in every league.
Yeah.
Like and my favorite term for hitters is preternatural. They talk about their hit tool. When you see a scout start talking about a preternatural swing,
Yes.
they're like hardcore excited about this guy.
Yeah, once the like big words come out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Totally. Well, listen, Evan, it's been great to have you on the show and to hear your philosophy and how you're integrating to the ABL. I'm glad you're enjoying it. But happy to have you on because I know you've been watching the show for a long time. So thank you for being a guest. And we'll have to have you back on later in the year to revisit like how your experience has been up to that date to see if your mind has changed or reinforced itself in some way. But for everybody else, thanks for watching, especially those who watched live tonight and for submitting questions. And I'll be back next week talking about the ABL Prospect Handbook. And in the interim, remember to ABP, always be prospecting.